Greetings, people. This is the news for today, Friday, April 19, 2024. So, today, the Supreme Court, the Constitutional Court, had ruled that Paula Llewellyn, the DPP, which is, of course, the Director of Public Prosecution, her extension to remain in that position that was granted in 2023, it has been declared void. So that means basically she has to leave that position, as was argued by the opposition. In today's video, we're just going to look at a flashback of what happened. We're going to start with the debate in the parliament where the government proposed the amendment to the constitution, which basically allow for her to remain in the position of DPP. She was supposed to retire at the age of 60, but they had two extensions. The first extension was for 3 years and the second extension for 2 years, which would basically mean that she would retire at 65. But as you know, in today's ruling, that decision was declared void and unconstitutional. So basically, Jamaica does not have a DPP at the present moment. But let's have a flashback, starting with the meeting in the parliament. First, we will hear from the government side, led by Delroy Chuck, the Minister of Justice. After Delroy Chuck, we will hear from Mark Golding, the leader of the opposition PNP, put forward some argument as to why the government should not change the constitution and allow for the DPP to remain in that position. And then, after the debate, we will take it to the today's news, where the King's Counsel, Michael Hilton, and other members of the opposition PNP react to the news that the decision to extend the tenure of the DPP was in fact unconstitutional and that she should be removed from that position. It's a long video, but stick and stay, quite interesting.
Madam Speaker, the Constitution of Jamaica establishes a retirement age of 60 for the position of the Auditor General and the Director of Public Prosecutions via Sections 121.1 and Sections 96.1. Madam Speaker, the Pensions Public Service Act, which was promulgated in 2017, sought to, among other things, gradually increase the retirement age of public officers to 65 years. The bill before this Honourable House, Madam Speaker, reflects a proposal previously considered by Cabinet during the deliberations on the Pensions Bill in 2017. It was the intention of the government to amend the Constitution to give effect to the change in the age of retirement for officers so as to extend the increase in the retirement age to both the Auditor General and the Director of Public Prosecutions. Madam Speaker, as is evident, this was due mainly to the fact that the constitutionally established ceiling for the age of retirement for the Auditor General and the Director of Public Prosecutions is actually 5 years shorter in duration when compared to the upper limit set in the Pensions Public Service Act for public officer in the civil service. Madam Speaker, the proposed amendment to the Constitution will allow for the expansion of the term of service from 60 to 65 years, thereby addressing the inconsistency that currently exists between the two pieces of legislation and, by extension, creating a more level playing field for all. Madam Speaker, I will now highlight the main features of the bill. Constitution Amendment, Sections 96.1 and 121.1, 2023. Clause 1, Madam Speaker, treats with a short title and construction. Madam Speaker, Clause 2 amends Section 96.1 of the Constitution by removing the words 60 years and substituting instead the words 65 years. Additionally, the clause deletes the words not exceeding 65 years in paragraph B of Section 96.1 and substitute the words not exceeding 70 years. These amendments raise the age of retirement to 65 years and allow the Governor General in appropriate cases to permit an extension up to 70 years. The clause goes on to allow a sitting Director of Public Prosecutions at the date of the commencement of this amendment to the Constitution to elect in writing to the Governor General to retire at any time after attaining the age of 60 years. Clause 3, Madam Speaker, amends Section 121(1) of the Constitution by removing the word 60 years and substituting instead the words 65 years. Additionally, the clause deletes the words not exceeding 65 years in paragraph B of Section 121(1) and substitute the words not exceeding 70 years. The clause, Madam Speaker, goes on to allow a sitting Auditor General at the date of the commencement of this amendment to the Constitution to elect in writing to the Governor General to retire at any time after attaining the age of 60 years. Madam Speaker, this ends the clause-by-clause summary of the bill before you. I now, Madam Speaker, note that the framers, Madam Speaker, of the Constitution anticipated that the age of retirement can change, so that the provisions were neither entrenched in 2017, and it can be dealt with today.
I will go with the opposition leader first, and then Cousins.
Madam Speaker, as I've already indicated on the motion for first reading of the bill, we object strongly to what is happening here today with this constitutional amendment, which has been brought here without prior notice to us, without any consultation with us, concerning provisions to do with the appointment or extension of tenure of the Director of Public Prosecutions and the Auditor General. In relation to those provisions, consultation with the Leader of the Opposition is required, whether for appointment or for extension. Yet we are amending those provisions without any prior consultation. Furthermore, the Constitutional Reform Committee, which is dealing with the reform of the Constitution, has not been seized with this matter. It has not been discussed there. They have been bypassed with this particular amendment. The minister is indicating that this is pursuant to the amendment to the pensions legislation of 2017. But the first attempt to extend the tenure of the DPP arose in 2019. And that extension was for 3 years. We objected, my predecessor, objected strongly in writing with substantive reasons why we did not support that extension then. Nevertheless, the government has chosen to proceed in this way, to seek to amend the Constitution of Jamaica by bringing a bill, tabling it on the same day that they intend to debate it and pass it in the House. It is bad governance, it is disrespectful to the opposition, it is disrespectful to the Constitutional Reform Committee, and it is a dark day for our country, that we would proceed in this way on a matter of constitutional amendment. Constitutional amendments are not to be addressed in this manner. And furthermore, to seek to amend the Constitution so as to affect the existing tenure of incumbent holders of office is also controversial and I think improper. It is one thing to amend the Constitution to deal with future office holders, but you're dealing with incumbent office holders and extending their tenure in office. And we object to the procedure that is being followed, and as I've said, we'll be taking legal advice on it to see whether or not we can challenge it in court based on the procedure being followed and the overall surrounding circumstances that have led the government to proceed in this way. Furthermore, Madam Speaker, the context in which this is happening is also disturbing. We are told that there are pending investigations by the Integrity Commission in relation to parliamentarians for illicit enrichment. We do not know the facts around that, other than that's referred to in the annual report of the Integrity Commission, which has, after some delay, been tabled and made public. The Director of Corruption Prosecutions, who would have charge of those proceedings, is subject to the supervening authority of the DPP under the Constitution. The rush to make these amendments happen now in that context is also, to my mind, something which requires some explanation. And I'm extremely uncomfortable with the way the government is proceeding in this matter. And the howls of the government benches as they seek to ram through this amendment to the Constitution of the country further reinforces my concerns. As I have said, Madam Speaker, this is a dark day for Jamaica. I'm very, very disappointed in the government that they are proceeding in this way in relation to a matter of constitutional importance, affecting 2 constitutional office holders. The appointment or extension of their tenures is something for which consultation is required. Yet they are proceeding here with no consultation, and they want to ram it through on the last day of the current session of Parliament before the summer recess. Madam Speaker, we will not be supporting this bill.
Next we will take the member from Clarendon Southwest.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'll begin by also agreeing with the Leader of Opposition as it relates to my objection, not to the fact that the Constitution, by way of Section 49(4), does provide for an amendment to Section 96(1), because if you look at 49(4), it speaks to 96(2), 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So obviously 96(1) was not contemplated as an entrenched provision. But I have to disagree with the approach that is being taken. And provisions that require consultation, for example, with the Leader of Opposition, if amendments or alterations are to be made, similarly, out of due respect to the office of the Leader of Opposition, and in the spirit of the Constitution, that consultations ought to have been had. So now hearing that no consultation was in place, in fact, I believe is totally improper. If you look at the context of how we are approaching this thing, so are you saying, Minister, that any government can at any time reduce that age from 60, that is in Section 96(1), to 50 or 45 to suit their cause? You see the danger of that? The danger of it is that no, Section 96(1) provides for alteration. You can lower the age if you want to. And that is the fact. And I'm saying that that is absurd and it is dangerous. Because what may obtain is any government at any time coming to this Parliament, amending a constitutional provision by way of a simple majority to suit its agenda. So that clearly must have been an oversight. The most important point is that we are embarking now on a process of constitutional reform. And having embarked on that process, we ought to have considered this provision in that entire process. Put it to the people to find out if the people of Jamaica have an interest in extending the office holder to 70 years. Because 70 years are really going now, you know. It's not 65 years, you know. It's really 70 years. Because the amendment that is being proposed is for 70 years. Now, the danger of it, you know, is that September 21st, I believe, will make it 3 years since the last extension, which would mean as at the 21st of September, a few months from now, the current holder of the office of DPP. No, this is reality. The current holder of the office of the DPP's tenure would come to an end. The Constitution provided for consultation. 3 years was granted. She could have gotten 5 years. 3 years was granted for some purpose, I don't know. I was not here at the time. But the 3 years must have been granted on some consideration. Now, Minister, the question is this. Has the current holder of the office of DPP, for example, applied or sent any request to you for an extension? Because I don't know what would have necessitated us coming here to make this amendment. Is it that there's nobody at the office of the DPP? We have 2 King's Counsel, 1 director, 1 senior deputy director. King's Counsels. Is it that the senior deputy director is not competent to take over the role of the office of director of public prosecutions? Is it that we're having a challenge with the process? Because the reality is that, having contemplated that September, the tenure would come to an end, we would have perhaps embarked on a process by now to select a replacement. Is it that no process has been embarked upon to select a replacement as yet? Because we're in July, August, September. So we should have been far down the wicket where a replacement is being contemplated. So I find it very curious for coming here today to do this. Minister, you know that I am a proponent of the extension of age limits for members of the judiciary. You remember when we were here last year, I believe, when the Court of Appeal President's tenure was coming to an end. And I stood here in Parliament and advocated for it to be extended because it's just a process. And that's why I'm saying the process is my problem. No consultation, no. So, Minister, you know that I am an advocate for that. As a member of the legal profession, I know that attorneys who attain the age of 60, going 70, 80, many are still sharp, perhaps in the prime. So nothing is wrong with that. The procedure and the process, justice must not only be done, it must be seen to be done. And something is rotten in this entire approach. No, Tony, I'm not finished. Oh. My final point, Minister, is we hear the prosecutors, them crying. We hear the cries of the prosecutors. The salary that they're receiving is not sufficient. I know that a Crown Counsel, what they make is little to nothing. Because I've personally been impacted by that. My spouse was a Crown Counsel up to 2 years ago.
Member?
I am debating.
No, you're not debating.
I'm saying that the office of the director of public prosecution, rather than focus on this, we're focusing on the wrong things. It's a misplaced priority situation. Focus on trying to give the prosecutors a decent salary.
Member Cousins, could you stick to the issue being debated?
I'm at liberty when I'm debating. You can't restrict me. It's not a statement from a minister. It's a debate. Yes. I am at liberty. I am sure. So, Minister, in closing, I'm saying that the focus should be on the working conditions. You met with them recently, I'm sure. Oh, so you know the issues. Focus on that. What we're focusing on now is not the real issue. The bigger issue is ensuring that our prosecutors in this country are comfortable and get compensation and benefits that they deserve. They are at significant risk in this country. Every day they go out there to prosecute criminals. And you're telling me that you cannot give them a decent and affordable living condition? That is totally unacceptable. But, Minister, I said the approach you're taking now, I have a lot of respect for you. You know that. The approach we're taking now is totally improper. And without consultation, I have to vote against it. Thank you.
Thanks. Next, we will take the member from St. Andrew South Eastern.
Madam Speaker, I have 3 points I want to make. My first point relates to process. And I want to repeat what my colleagues have said about process. This is a constitutional amendment which goes to the heart of 2 of the most critical offices in the country. In addition to the lack of consultation with the opposition leader, there is need for consultation more broadly within the society to determine the appropriateness of these amendments. So I want to give you an example with the Auditor General. Across the world, including the Commonwealth, countries are moving to fixed terms for their Auditor Generals, not terms where people serve until a particular age. Within the Commonwealth, you have the United Kingdom, South Africa, Australia, within Europe, within Asia, fixed terms, whether it is 7 years, 10 years, 12 years. The benefit of a fixed term is that the person knows that at the end of a period, regardless of decisions they may take, and in these two cases, these two office holders deal with very sensitive matters related to public officials. And the fixed term gives them a sense of security. So the first issue on consultation, we are moving against the grain in terms of what most of the world is doing in moving to fixed terms. The second issue I want to raise in respect to the DPP, it is very important that both the perception and the reality of independence of that office and impartiality be maintained. Absolutely. It cannot be right for the executive arm of the government to be rushing through Parliament with no notice an extension of the office holder of the DPP. You are compromising the independence of the office by doing so. And as such, the perception will arise that the incumbent, who is the beneficiary of this extension, will be somehow beholden to the executive. Right. It is wrong. It is absolutely wrong. So on the issue of process, the process is wrong. There has been no consultation with the opposition or with anybody in civil society or with the wider society on two critical amendments. Secondly, we are going against the grain of good governance, where more countries are moving to fixed terms for holders of this office. And third, we are compromising the independence and impartiality of the office of DPP by doing it in this manner. And as my two colleagues said, I will vote against this amendment.
The member from St. Andrew Western.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I'm very concerned. And the reason is because we are engaged in a process of constitutional reform, of which I'm a member of that committee. That committee so far has worked in harmony and on a basis of consensus. That's a declared principle in which we've all accepted and abided by and have conducted our discussions. My rising today is not to discuss the committee and what has been discussed in the committee, but to say that to have this important constitutional amendment to two critical offices and not giving the committee an opportunity to even discuss this matter. Tomorrow, we have already agreed that we have consultations, town hall consultations with the people. I must say that to date, this issue has not come up in any of the town hall discussion. But having come up and been placed on the table of Parliament, I would have, for example, liked to see and to hear the views of these persons with whom we are consulting. So to have this submitted today, tabled today, and to be taken all in one go, without any opportunity for us tomorrow, and I'm sure tomorrow, if we proceed with those town hall meetings, this question is going to come up. And the people would have been deprived of an opportunity to express themselves on this very important issue. Prime Minister, I believe, I want to urge you to, it is not too late to consider this going to have implications for the very important process that you've put in train to consult the people of this country on the reform of the Constitution. This is a fundamental issue, and it affects and will, if it goes forward, undermine that process that we have invested time and effort, significant time and effort, in trying to bring to a closure. And I am concerned about it, deeply concerned about approaching it in this way. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The member from St. Catherine Eastern.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Minister, I'm going to ask you if you could tell me what is the rate of attrition in the DDP office. I am told that it is very, very high. And I'm wondering if they feel that there is no room for them to be promoted. Because, Minister, we have to be very careful. By even the extension of age that we are talking about, they are going to now believe that there is no room at all for them, for their upward mobility. And therefore, I believe we need to look carefully on this, because don't care how good the persons are, we have a better each time. So we need to refresh that office and do it now.
Minister Chuck.
Madam Speaker, I note the comments of the members. I now ask that the bill be read a second time.
The question posed by the minister is that the bill be read a second time. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
A bill entitled An Act to Amend the Constitution of Jamaica to provide for an increase in the retirement age of the Director of Public Prosecutions and the Auditor General and the four connected matters read a second time.
The House will now resolve itself into a committee of the whole House to consider the bill, clause by clause.
Madam Speaker, you could proceed. Madam Chairman, you could proceed. No, go through.
Minister, I now put to the House clause 1 of the bill. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it.
At the end.
If you call for divide again, I will then take the opportunity, because during the discussions I researched the decision made to allow a divide on the first reading of the bill, which was an incorrect decision to have made. And I will ensure that the House is seized of the section of the standing order, Section 45, as it relates to collection of votes, requires that the Speaker or Chairman allow the conclusion of a debate on any question before we are allowed to raise our voices in respect of ayes and nays, and continues into Section 46. So I am going to...
No, you can't mess with her. No, tell her how to go.
Continue, Chairman.
Continue. To know the rules.
I put clause 2. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? I put clause 3. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? I put the title and enacting clause. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? The question is that I do report the bill as having passed committee stage without amendments. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it. I do report the bill as having passed committee stage without amendments. Minister?
Madam Speaker, I now ask that the bill be read a third time.
Those in favor? Those against? Clerk, we will take the divide that they have called for. Please read alphabetically and have persons vote individually as it relates to accepting or voting against the bill.
Mr. Bartlett? Mr. Brown? Dr. Brown-Burke? Dr. Chang? Dr. Charles? Mr. Charles? Mr. Chin? Mr. Chuck? Mr. Clark? Dr. Clark? Mr. Cousins?
No.
Ms. Crawford?
No, 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 no.
Mrs. Cuthbert Flynn? Ms. Daly? Mr. Davis? Ms. Davis? Dr. Dunn? Mr. Golding? Mr. Graham? Ms. Grange? Mr. Green? Dr. Guy? Ms. Hamilton? Ms. Hannah? Mr. Henriquez? Mr. Henry? Mr. Holness? Mrs. Hol... Oh, no. Mr. Hutchinson? Mr. Hutchinson? Mr. Ilton? Mr. Jackson? Mr. Lawrence? Miss Lee? Mrs. Malawu Fort? Mr. Main? Mr. McKenzie? Mr. Miller? Miss Morrison? Mr. Montague? Mr. Morgan? Mrs. Nita Garvey? Mr. Paulwell? Mr. Phillips? Dr. Phillips? Mr. Robertson? Mr. Robinson? Mr. Samuda? Mr. Shaw? Mr. Siblist? Mr. Slowly? Miss Smith? Mr. Terrelong? Dr. Tufton? Mrs. Vaz? Mr. Vaz? Mr. Warmington? Dr. Wheatley? Mr. Williams? Mrs. Williams? Mr. Wilson? Mr. Witter? Mr. Wright? No man, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
I do report that the votes are 39 yeas and 8 nays.
A bill entitled An Act to Amend the Constitution of Jamaica to provide for an increase in the retirement age of the Director of Public Prosecutions and the Auditor General, and for connected matters, read a third time and passed.
When we started our submissions in this case, the first thing that we said is that the case is not about Ms. Llewellyn. It's not about how she did her duty. It's not even really about the extension of the age. The case is about the rule of law, about establishing a principle that the same laws apply to everybody, and that the Constitution needs to be respected. And we think that's what the court's ruling has indicated today. So we are pleased with the ruling, the result of the court effectively saying that the Constitution requires you to treat everybody in the same way and not make special preferences.
Does this mean now that the DPP will have to step away from office?
As of today. Yes.
As of today. And there's no further challenge that she can make?
Well, I don't know what the government will respond. You don't ask.
Okay. Mr. Paula, what's your reaction?
Well, I'll start in pretty much the same way. We've always said that this was not about Ms. Llewellyn, and it's more to do with our fundamental belief and respect for the Constitution. There's also an important statement on governance. A lot of these things can be avoided if there is respect for the opposition in power. And this matter could have been dealt with by a conversation with the Prime Minister and the leader of the opposition, and which is what the Constitution requires. And if that were done and respect is given, then we wouldn't have this unfortunate situation where a public servant is being embarrassed. So I regret that aspect of it for sure. But I believe that the judgment was a good one.